Montana Territory, 1871. The harsh winter winds had finally surrendered to spring's gentle touch, leaving Copper Creek to bask in the golden sunlight of renewed hope. Yet for some, like 25-year-old Heath Moreland, the change of seasons meant little in a world where survival was merely a day-to-day affair. The frontier had taught him one unwavering truth. Attachment was a luxury men like him couldn't afford. Heath adjusted his worn Stetson as he guided his chestnut mare through the muddy main street. His lean frame and broad shoulders spoke of a life spent in the saddle, while his clean-shaven face and clear blue eyes belied the hardness he'd cultivated within. 3 years riding with the Pony Express, followed by cattle drives and bounty hunting, had carved away whatever softness might have once existed in him. "A man's only got himself out here," he often muttered to his horse, Penny, the only companion he permitted himself. "Trust gets you nothing but a shallow grave." He'd seen too many good men die for foolish notions like love and family. His own parents had succumbed to fever when he was 16, leaving him alone to face the unforgiving West. The lesson had been clear. Attachments were weaknesses, and weakness was fatal on the frontier. Copper Creek was meant to be a brief stop, provisions, maybe a hot bath, then back to the solitary trail. The town had sprung up around the mining operations, a collection of rough-hewn buildings populated by the usual frontier folk: miners, merchants, drifters, and those who preyed upon them all. As Heath tied Penny to the hitching post outside the general store, commotion down the street caught his attention. A small crowd had gathered, their murmurs carrying on the spring breeze. Curiosity, his perpetual weakness, pulled him toward the scene. At the center stood a young woman, perhaps 20 years old, her face streaked with dirt and tears. Her chestnut brown hair fell in disheveled waves around her shoulders, and her plain blue calico dress was travel-worn and dirty at the hem. She clutched a small bundle wrapped in a threadbare blanket to her chest, her slender shoulders shaking with each sob. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking as she addressed an older man who Heath recognized as the town undertaker. "I cannot pay now, but I will work. I will do anything. Please, bury my child." The undertaker, a gaunt man named Simmons, shook his head. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I run a business. No money, no burial. That's how it works out here." The woman's knees seemed to buckle slightly, but she remained standing, clutching her precious burden tighter. "He deserves a proper Christian burial. Please, he's just a baby." Her voice, though broken, carried the soft lilt of the South, Georgia, perhaps. He found himself moving forward before he'd made any conscious decision to do so. Something about the woman's dignity in the face of such crushing grief stirred something he'd thought long dead within him. "How much?" Heath asked, the words emerging from his throat before he could reconsider. The crowd parted as he approached. The undertaker looked Heath up and down, assessing the well-worn but quality gear of a working cowboy. $10 for a proper burial. $5 for a pine box and a shallow grave. The woman turned to Heath, and he found himself looking into eyes the color of summer honey. Despite her grief, there was a fierce pride there that struck him. "I don't take charity," she said softly. "It's not charity," Heath replied. "It's—" He faltered, unsure himself why he was doing this. No child should go without a proper resting place. He reached into his pocket and counted out $10, nearly half of what he had to his name, and handed it to the undertaker. "A proper burial," he insisted. The crowd murmured in surprise. In a frontier town where most looked after only themselves, such generosity was remarkable. The woman's eyes widened, fresh tears forming. "I'm Olivia Kennedy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And this was my son, Thomas." Heath nodded, uncomfortable with the gratitude in her eyes. "Heath Moreland," he replied simply. "I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am." The undertaker cleared his throat. "I'll need to take the child now, to prepare him." A flash of panic crossed Olivia's face, her arms tightening around her bundle. The thought of surrendering her baby, even in death, was clearly unbearable. "I'll go with you," he found himself saying. "We'll both see that things are done right." Later, as they stood in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking Copper Creek, Olivia finally shared her story. She had traveled west with her husband in search of a new beginning after the war had destroyed their plantation in Georgia. Her husband had died in a mining accident 2 months ago, leaving her alone and with child. The baby had come early, too early, and hadn't survived his first night in the world. "I have nowhere to go," she admitted as the first shovelful of dirt fell upon the tiny pine coffin. "No family, no money." Heath shifted uncomfortably. Her pain was palpable, hanging in the air between them like a physical thing. He had spent years avoiding such entanglements, such responsibilities. And yet, "There's a widow, Martha Sims, who runs the boarding house," he said slowly. "She might need help. I could put in a word." Olivia looked at him with those honey-colored eyes, a flicker of hope shining through her grief. "Why would you help me, Mr. Moreland? You don't know me." He couldn't answer her question because he didn't understand it himself. All he knew was that watching this young widow stand with dignity in her darkest hour had awakened something in him, something he'd tried to bury alongside his parents years ago. The burial of little Thomas Kennedy marked the beginning of what Heath had sworn to avoid: connection. Within a week, he had secured Olivia a position at the boarding house, cooking and cleaning in exchange for room and board. He told himself he would leave once she was settled, return to the solitary trail he knew best. But something kept him in Copper Creek. He took odd jobs, breaking horses for the livery, riding as security for the stagecoach, even helping with spring roundup at nearby ranches. Each evening, he found himself at the boarding house, sitting at Olivia's table, listening to her soft voice as she gradually emerged from her grief. "You don't strike me as a man who stays in one place," she remarked one evening in late May, as they sat on the boarding house porch. The setting sun painted the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold. "I'm not," he admitted, rolling a cigarette between his fingers. "Or at least, I wasn't." "What changed?" Her question was innocent, but it cut straight to the heart of the matter. Heath stared out at the horizon. "I'm still trying to figure that out." Their quiet friendship blossomed amid the backdrop of frontier life. Olivia's natural warmth drew others to her: the schoolteacher, the blacksmith's wife, even gruff old Martha Sims. Heath watched with a mixture of admiration and confusion as she built connections he had always avoided. "People need each other out here," she told him one Sunday after church as they walked back to town. "The frontier isn't meant to be faced alone. Depending on others is dangerous," he countered. "I've seen good men die waiting for help that never came." Olivia's expression softened. "And I've seen good men suffer needlessly because they were too proud to ask for the help standing right beside them." In June, trouble arrived in the form of Thaddeus Jenkins, a wealthy mine owner who took a keen interest in the beautiful young widow. His advances were cloaked in respectability, offers of better employment, gifts for the boarding house. But his intentions were clear to Heath. "He could offer you security," Heath said reluctantly one evening, after Jenkins had departed with promises to return. "A man with his money could give you a good life." Olivia's eyes flashed. "There are different kinds of poverty, Mr. Moreland. I may have lost everything material, but I still have my dignity and my choice." She paused, studying his face. "Why are you trying to push me toward him?" The question caught him off guard. Why indeed? The answer, he realized with growing discomfort, was fear. Fear of what he was beginning to feel for this remarkable woman. Fear of the vulnerability that came with caring. Before he could formulate a response, gunshots erupted from the saloon down the street. Within moments, the quiet evening dissolved into chaos as men spilled out onto the street, fists and bullets flying. "Stay inside," Heath ordered, pushing Olivia toward the door. "Bar it behind me." The brawl had escalated quickly. A dispute over cards had turned deadly when one miner accused another of cheating. By the time Heath reached the scene, the sheriff was struggling to restore order. A stray bullet shattered the window of the mercantile. Another whizzed past Heath's ear as he pulled an elderly bystander to safety. When he spotted Jenkins in the midst of the fray, attempting to reach his horse, Heath didn't hesitate. He tackled the mine owner just as a bullet splintered the hitching post where Jenkins had stood. "You saved my life," Jenkins gasped, his fine suit now coated in mud and blood from a cut on his forehead. Heath helped him up with a grim nod. Any man would have done the same. Jenkins studied him with newfound respect. "Not every man. You've earned my gratitude, Moreland." The incident changed something between the two men. Jenkins continued his attentions to Olivia but treated Heath with a cautious deference. For his part, Heath found himself increasingly protective of the young widow, staying closer to town, watching for threats both seen and unseen. July brought scorching heat and drought to the territory. The creek that gave the town its name dwindled to a trickle, and tensions rose with the temperature. When word came that outlaws had been spotted in the area, Heath joined the sheriff's hastily assembled posse. "I'll be back in a few days," he promised Olivia on the boarding house porch. "Stay close to town while I'm gone." Something in his tone must have betrayed his concern, for she reached out and touched his arm, the first time she had initiated such contact. "Be careful, Heath," she said, using his given name for the first time. "I couldn't bear to lose." She faltered, her eyes dropping to her hands. "Just be careful." The hunt for the outlaws took the posse deep into the hills. On the third day, they discovered a burned-out homestead, the work of the Blackwell gang, known for their brutality. The family had been murdered, their bodies left to the elements. As Heath helped bury the settlers, a man, woman, and 2 young children, the parallels to his own past and to Olivia's recent loss struck him with devastating clarity. This was why he had avoided attachments. This was the cruel reality of frontier life. "It's not worth it," he told his horse that night, as the other posse members slept around the campfire. "Getting close to anyone out here is just asking for this kind of pain." Yet even as the words left his mouth, he knew they rang hollow. Olivia's face appeared in his mind, her quiet strength and gentle smile a rebuke to his fears. The posse returned to Copper Creek empty-handed, having lost the outlaws' trail in the Rocky Highlands. Heath rode directly to the boarding house, an unfamiliar anxiety gripping him until he saw Olivia safe, hanging laundry in the yard. The relief he felt at seeing her was startling in its intensity. "You're back," she said, her smile brightening her face. "I was worried." "We didn't catch them," he admitted. "The Blackwell gang is still out there." Her smile faltered. "The Blackwell gang? Are you certain?" Something in her voice gave him pause. "You know of them?" Olivia glanced around, then lowered her voice. "My husband, before he died, he worked in Jenkins' mine. He told me he'd discovered something, evidence that Jenkins was paying outlaws to drive settlers off their land with valuable mineral rights." Heath stared at her, processing this revelation. "You're saying Jenkins is connected to the Blackwell gang?" She nodded, her face pale. "Thomas, my husband, was going to take what he knew to the territorial marshal. The next day, there was a cave-in that killed only him. The implications were staggering. If true, it meant Jenkins was responsible not only for her husband's death, but for the slaughtered family the posse had found. "Why haven't you said anything before now?" Heath demanded. "I had no proof. And then I discovered I was with child." Her voice broke. "I was afraid. I'm still afraid." Heath's mind raced. If Jenkins suspected Olivia knew about his dealings, her life was in danger. The mine owner's interest in her took on a sinister new light. Was he keeping her close to monitor her, or planning something worse? "We need to get you somewhere safe," he said, already planning their departure. "I can't just run," she protested. "This is the only home I have now. And my baby." Her eyes drifted toward the cemetery on the hill. Heath understood then what held her in Copper Creek, the tiny grave she visited each Sunday, the last connection to all she had lost. "Then we'll find proof," he decided. "Enough to bring Jenkins down legally." The next 2 weeks were a dangerous game of cat and mouse. Heath took a job at Jenkins' mine, listening, watching, gathering what information he could while maintaining the pretense of simple employment. Olivia continued her work at the boarding house, accepting Jenkins' attentions with feigned gratitude while secretly searching through papers he occasionally left in his room. It was Olivia who found the first concrete evidence, a ledger with coded entries that, once deciphered, showed payments to be following dates of known Blackwell gang attacks. Heath discovered more. Overheard conversations between Jenkins and his foreman about clearing a section of land where a rich new copper vein had been discovered. "We've almost got enough," Heath told Olivia as they met secretly behind the livery stable. "The territorial marshal will be passing through next week. We just need to hold out until then." But fate had other plans. That night, Jenkins invited Olivia to dinner at his home, insisting with such authority that she dared not refuse. Heath watched from the shadows as she entered the large house on the hill, every instinct screaming that something was wrong. His fears were confirmed when, an hour later, he spotted Jenkins' foreman and 2 rough-looking men slipping around to the back of the house. Heath didn't hesitate. He broke in through a side window, gun drawn, moving silently through the opulent house until he heard voices from Jenkins' study. "You've been quite clever, Mrs. Kennedy," Jenkins was saying, his voice cold and calculating. "But did you really think I wouldn't notice you and your cowboy friend asking questions? Searching through my things. I don't know what you're talking about." Olivia's voice was steady, though Heath could hear the fear beneath her words. "Your husband made the same mistake, thinking he could threaten me. The mine accident was regrettable but necessary. Just as what happens to you tonight will be regrettable but necessary." Heath kicked the door open, his revolver aimed at Jenkins' heart. "Step away from her," he growled. Jenkins turned, his surprise quickly replaced by a calculating smile. "Moreland, I suspected you might try something heroic." He gestured, and Heath heard the click of a pistol being cocked behind him. "Drop your gun, cowboy," came the foreman's rough voice, "or I put a bullet in your spine." The next moments passed in a blur of violence. Heath dove to the side as the foreman fired, the bullet splintering the doorframe. He returned fire, catching the man in the shoulder. Jenkins lunged for a desk drawer, but Olivia was faster, grabbing a heavy paperweight and bringing it down on his wrist with a sickening crack. The two hired guns burst in from another door. Heath shot one in the leg, but the other tackled him, sending his gun skittering across the floor. As they grappled, Olivia snatched up Heath's fallen revolver and pointed it at Jenkins, who was reaching for his own weapon despite his injured wrist. "Don't," she warned, her voice trembling but resolute. Jenkins sneered. "You don't have the courage, Mrs. Kennedy. Your husband didn't either." The gunshot was deafening in the confined space. Jenkins staggered back, clutching his shoulder where Olivia's bullet had struck him. His face registered shock before he collapsed into his chair. Heath finally subdued the remaining gunman with a solid punch that rendered the man unconscious. He turned to find Olivia still holding the smoking gun, her face pale but determined. "We need to get the sheriff," she said quietly. The aftermath unfolded quickly. The sheriff, once presented with the evidence and confronted with wounded men willing to testify against their employer to save their own skins, arrested Jenkins. The territorial marshal arrived 3 days later to transfer the prisoners to the capital for trial. "You saved my life," Heath told Olivia as they stood on the boarding house porch, watching the marshal's wagon disappear down the road with Jenkins and his men. "We saved each other," she corrected him, her honey-colored eyes meeting his. "That's what people do when they care for one another." The word hung between them, care. It encompassed so much more than either was ready to name. "I should be moving on," Heath said, though the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. "Now that Jenkins is gone, you'll be safe here." Olivia studied him, a sad smile touching her lips. "Is that what you want? To return to your solitary trail?" The question forced him to confront the transformation that had occurred within him these past months. The man who had ridden into Copper Creek believing attachment was weakness was gone. In his place stood someone who had discovered strength in connection, purpose in protecting others, and a future in the eyes of a remarkable woman. "No," he admitted finally. "That's not what I want." "What do you want, Heath Moreland?" she asked softly. He took her hand, the gesture both tentative and sure. "A chance to build something here. With you, if you'll have me." The weeks that followed were filled with new beginnings. Heath used his savings to purchase a small ranch outside town. Nothing grand, but good land with a creek running through it, and enough pasture for the cattle he planned to raise. Olivia continued working at the boarding house while they courted properly, Sunday dinners and chaperoned walks gradually giving way to deeper confidences and tender embraces. In October, as the aspens turned golden on the mountainsides, they stood together in the small church in Copper Creek, exchanging vows before the community that had become their family. Afterward, they visited the small grave on the hill, where Olivia placed her bridal bouquet. "He would have liked you," she told Heath, her arm linked through his. "My Thomas had a good judge of character. I would have been proud to be his stepfather," Heath replied, surprising himself with how deeply he meant it. Their first winter on the ranch tested them: blizzards, frozen pipes, cattle that needed constant tending. But they faced each challenge together, finding strength in shared burden and joy in simple moments. Evenings by the fire, Olivia reading aloud while Heath cleaned his tack, mornings breaking ice on the water troughs, their breath mingling in the frosty air as they worked side by side. Spring brought new calves, green grass, and news that filled their home with renewed hope. "A baby," Heath whispered, his hand resting gently on Olivia's still flat stomach. "Our baby." She covered his hand with her own. "Are you frightened?" she asked, knowing how the dangers of frontier childbirth weighed on him after what happened to her first child. "Yes," he admitted, "but not enough to wish it otherwise." He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I used to think the greatest safety lay in avoiding connections, in never being vulnerable to loss. And now," she looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the same love that had transformed him. "Now I know that real safety is having someone to face the dangers with. That love doesn't make the frontier less harsh. It gives us the strength to endure its harshness." On a warm September day in 1872, their daughter was born, healthy, strong, and with her mother's honey-colored eyes. They named her Hope, a testament to what they had found in each other against all odds. As Heath held his daughter while Olivia rested, he stood by the window of their ranch house, looking out over the land that was now home. In the distance, he could see Copper Creek, the town where a grieving widow had once begged for a proper burial for her child, and a lonely cowboy had discovered that in reaching out to help another, he had saved himself as well. "Your mama taught me the most important lesson," he whispered to the sleeping infant. "That out here, where life is hardest, love isn't a weakness. It's the only thing worth fighting for." Outside, the Montana sky stretched endless and blue above their ranch, their home. The promise of tomorrow written in every acre they had claimed together. In every moment they had chosen connection over isolation, love over fear. For Heath Moreland, once determined to ride alone through life, the greatest adventure had turned out to be standing still, planting roots, and building a life with the woman who had shown him that even in the wild heart of the frontier, love could not only survive but flourish.